Let me begin by posing a question and really try to put yourselves in the scenario. If every doctor at every major medical center in the country said that you would die of cancer in the next few months and that nothing could be done to stop it, how would you feel? What would you do? Would you give up hope? My struggle for hope began in late 2002. I was in the prime of my life. At age 35, life was good. I had just returned from working internationally a couple of years as a VP of Business Development for global software and technology companies, traveling around Europe and Asia and putting together a large network of high-level contacts. Yeah, I mean, everything was going good. I was about to buy a house and settle down in my hometown here of Los Gatos. And even though I'd always been an athlete and even played quarterback for the local Los Gatos High School, I was probably in my best physical shape ever. I also volunteered for good causes. I would go into the Red Cross monthly to donate blood platelets for kids with leukemia, as I was told that they were urgently needed my B-positive blood type. So in early December 2002, I was going in for my donation, except this time the nurse checking me in noticed something wrong with my blood counts. Said I was borderline anemic. That's odd. I'd always been the picture of perfect health. She didn't seem too alarmed and said, well, why don't you go see your doctor and come back in a week and we'll do your donation then. I was alarmed because, of course, I'd always been healthy, but I immediately went and saw my doctor, and a couple of blood tests later, and I was urgently referred to a specialist, a hematologist. And when I went to his office, he was a nice elderly gentleman, and he explained that we don't know really what's going on until we get a sample of your bone marrow, so let's do that right here. And he punched a hole in the back of my pelvic bone with this thick coring needle, which really hurts. And the next day in the evening, I went back with my mother to get the results. When the doctor entered the exam room in slow motion, is the best way I can describe it. His back turned toward us as he closed the door. And as he slowly turned to face us, I could see tears running down his face. He looked at the floor for what seemed like an eternity, and then he said, "This is the hardest part of my job." A wave of dread came over me, and I squeezed my mom's hand even tighter. He took his time, he sat down next to me and put his hand on my knee, and he said, "Son, you are in for the fight of your life. You have acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It is very far advanced, stage 4+, and you are very, very sick. I need you to go home and get your affairs in order, and tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. they're expecting you to check in at Stanford Medical Center for emergency treatment." Wow. Wait a minute. I can't be that sick. Slow down a minute. I mean, can I get a second opinion? He says, "Look, your bone marrow is 100% cancerous. Your body is not producing normal blood anymore. You're living on borrowed time. If you don't go check in tomorrow morning, you probably will not live the next 4 or 5 days." Whoa. I mean, I thought cancer was something that people fought for months and years, not something that kills you within days. This can't be happening. So I go home and I'm thinking, how am I supposed to wrap up my life, quit my job, notify everybody, and do all this in the next 12 hours? I mean, I was pacing back and forth, not knowing what to do first. So finally I sat down and wrote an email to all my contacts, my friends, my family, my loved ones, everybody in one email, and just said, "I love you all. Thank you for being a part of my life. And this might be the last time you hear from me." So, the next morning I woke up and we went to the hospital with my mom, I was calm and confident, hey, I'm healthy and young, and, if there's any chances of beating this, I'll be the one that beats it, right? And, not knowing anything about the medical system, I assumed that, one, my disease has been around for thousands of years, and I'm going to one of the top medical centers in the world. There must be a well-known best treatment for my situation, right? Also, I figured that any treatment they gave me, they would be giving me because it would give me the very best chances of remission and survival. Well, little did I know how wrong I was about everything. A few days into the treatment, I was given a drug that caused a severe side effect and went into code blue, cardiac arrest. And teams of doctors and nurses were working furiously to revive me, just as my girlfriend came in the room bringing the movie for us to watch. We almost had to revive her too. And I woke in the ICU a couple days later, and recovered. But I found out later that I was given an older, cheaper drug that was known for its bad side effects, and that there were newer, much safer, but much more expensive drugs available. Now, of course, if I had known that, I would have requested the newer, safer version. But because of the contracts with pharma companies and insurance companies and hospitals and everything, often the older, cheaper drugs are given first. So it's a minefield. So this was one of the first lessons about the corporate and institutional agendas that play in our medical system, which conflict with what is best for a patient. You know, most doctors care. They want to do what's best for their patients, but they're caught up in these agendas as well, often told what they can do and say by the hospital administration. So their hands are tied. So where is it? Isn't there some sort of advocacy service, somebody that can help me evaluate treatments and do everything? Anyway, when I went in there, they gave me 2 protocols to choose from, both of them the size of telephone books, and said, these are the 2 treatments we're offering. You get to choose. Are you kidding me? I mean, you want me to make a decision about something I know nothing about that could mean the difference between life and death? I mean, this is absurd that you're giving me. I mean, anyway, I blindly chose one of them and began the most horrifying 8 months of my life. Over the next few months, I was given, over and over, I was given lethal doses of neurotoxic chemos that would require weeks in immunosuppressed intensive care. And mistakes were made with medications. I mean, leukemia patients could be on dozens of medications, so mistakes happen all the time. And mistakes were made, and they almost cost me my life several times. I was in a universe I knew nothing about, and I felt alone and scared, and rightfully so. There was a lot of obstacles to try to get over, and I had no idea what I was doing. The idea for a foundation took shape, and I envisioned putting advocates in every cancer center in America and all over the world, if we could, so that patients would have somebody who could advise them medically. There's a lot of support systems out there for cancer patients. You need a ride, you need a support group, you need a wig, you need a blanket, but there's nobody that's advising you on what your treatment options are and what the treatment landscape looks like around in the world and what the best treatments are out there. So you're really on your own. Often doctors are under contract not to discuss any treatments that they don't offer at their hospital. Not one American doctor ever mentioned a treatment to me in 2+ years of treatment that they didn't offer at that hospital. I felt violated in a way. So I also saw other patients in the hospital that were dying simply because they couldn't find bone marrow matches. And most people could find bone marrow matches. It's just that most people in the United States were not yet signed up to be bone marrow donors and listed in the national database. I thought, I got to do something about this. So I got some information about it, and I set up a table on the corner of Main Street in Los Gatos, and I started passing out information about signing up to being a bone marrow donor and signing up to the national database and getting registered. The media caught on to the cause and started following me, and soon hundreds of people from the Silicon Valley community, especially right here in Los Gatos, stepped up to help. And it was just amazing. They put up Savor Eric banners everywhere. They put up a Savor Eric website to take donations. Enough money was raised to start a foundation and put on one of the largest bone marrow registration drives I've ever heard of. Over 1,000 people showed up to be tested and added to the National Marrow Donor Database. It was absolutely amazing. And I still get very choked up when I think that all those people in this community, they did that for me. They went there because they were hoping to be the match I needed. Unfortunately, no match was found, and the same day of that drive, I actually got a call from the Stanford patient coordinator telling me that all the treatments had failed and there's nothing else we can offer you, and so we're going to have hospice services call you next week to assist you in dying at home. In a voicemail. And I remember one time I went to see the psychiatrist who was part of the cancer team up at Stanford, and I was bawling my head off and feeling sorry for myself, and I'm dying in the next 2 months. What good is anything? And he said, Eric, if this is the last few weeks of your life, is this the way you want to be with yourself? Is this the way you want to experience it? Many people die abruptly. They don't have the luxury of knowing that they're dying in the next couple of months. So you actually get a choice of how you want to be with yourself. And that message really stuck with me as to how powerful we are in creating our own experience. And I didn't lose hope, and I never went into that pit of despair ever again. But I needed a miracle. Well, it turns out I was born in a naval hospital in Corpus Christi, Texas, back in summer of 1967, summer of love, and right in the middle of a massive hurricane that destroyed the hospital and the city. And my mother was very, very young, so I was given to the state of Texas as an orphan. And after I was evacuated out of the hospital and everything, I was adopted by an amazing couple at 5 weeks old. And they're here with us today, and I love them very much. I grew up in an amazing family, but I didn't know anybody I was blood related to. And but during my 20s, I actually did meet all my extended natural family, and that was wonderful to have all that knowledge and meet all those people. Turns out, I had a half sister who I only met 2 years before my diagnosis, and not only was she an assistant physician, but she worked in the bone marrow transplant unit at one of the top cancer centers in the world in Seattle. Miracles do happen. When she heard that Stanford was sending me home to die, she went to the head doctors there and said, hey, I'll be the donor. Can we get him in? And they said, yeah, we have a protocol we can offer. And so there was something. It was better than the alternative, right? So then began the long, teary goodbyes to all those people who had been supporting me and raising money, and the community that worked so hard to save me. And it was very difficult because essentially I was going to do a treatment that had very little chances of working, and for all intents and purposes, this was the last goodbye. I mean, it was like me having to say goodbye to my life and all the people in it. And it was a very difficult time. I gave away most of my possessions and put the rest in storage. And in September of 2003, my mother and I moved to the Seattle hospital, my mother being my caregiver. 8 months of two failed transplants, heavy doses of chemo and radiation, and very grueling treatments. Nothing worked. So still, after 8 months of treatment in Seattle and all these amazing trials, I still was out of options. What made matters worse, if they could be any worse, was having to stop an identity thief who was running around Seattle, opened up a dozen credit cards in my name, and was running around posing as Eric Drew with a fake driver's license and a bunch of credit cards. So this was, I was getting hit with this every day. And of course, I complained to the hospital administration. I knew in my gut that it had to be somebody at the hospital with access to my medical records that was doing this. And maybe it was a group of people, maybe it was a ring of people that had been doing this to sick and dying patients that they figured, they're not going to be around for another few months, so they won't need their identity. I complained to the FBI, the hospital administration, the mayor's office, the Federal Postal Inspection Service, but everybody, including most people in my family, thought I was a bit crazy. Well, fed up and with nothing else to lose, really, I decided I'm going to do something about this too. So problem was I had no immune system, and so I had to be on life support, and I needed constant infusions of blood products and antibiotics and antifungals to serve as an artificial immune system. So put it all in a backpack with a home infusion pump and hit the streets, and went out investigating the crime. I'm basically on a walker, and I'm bald, and it was quite a sight. Anyway, within a few weeks, I isolated a video of the guy making purchases at a Lowe's home improvement store, aired the videos on NBC News that night, and 30 people called in and identified him as the lab tech that worked in the hospital where I was being treated. So anyway, the Seattle police didn't do anything about it, so I demanded that this is a federal crime. I demand he be prosecuted under this new HIPAA patient privacy law. And finally, the FBI and the Justice Department agreed, and he was prosecuted as the very first person prosecuted under the HIPAA patient privacy laws in this country. So there I was in Seattle, no options, nothing left to do. And now I'm running out of hospitals and trials to even look at. I frantically consulted every major medical center in the country, and sorry, nothing we can do except offer you hospice care. So as a last-ditch effort, I decided, why not use all those international contacts that I spent 2 years building and see if I could crowdsource a solution. So I summarized my plight and sent emails out all over the world and asking for referrals to the top doctors in those countries. And lo and behold, just a couple weeks into that, a Swiss doctor had a solution. basically said, bone marrow is only a source of stem cells. If you don't have a source for bone marrow, then find another source of stem cells. He says, have you looked into umbilical cord? And I said, yeah, but it doesn't work on adults. He goes, I'm sorry that you've been told that, but that's not true. And as a matter of fact, it works very well. You just need 2 or 3 of them. An international search found a matching set of stem cells in a little cryobank in the basement of a 500-year-old building in Milan, Italy. Talk about a needle in a haystack. The key to saving my life, was this little bag of cells sitting in a basement on the other side of the world in a tub of liquid nitrogen. It was amazing. I mean, they had been frozen for 8 years from a little baby girl. So they agreed to hand carry those over. I found that the hospital in the U.S. that was going to be opening the first trials with this was Minnesota. I flew back, met with the head of adult transplant there, and he said, he laid it on the line. He goes, look, you've been through hell and back already. Your body is in terrible condition. You're in intense pain. Your legs are practically paralyzed. I think there's a very small chance that you would live through this. We would have to give you more radiation and chemo at one time than you've ever had before. And we just don't think you'll live through it. But if you do live through it, we think we can get these cells to grow in you. We think we understand the science enough to make it work. And who knows, it might give you a chance at a long-term life after. Well, it wasn't much of a choice for me. It was die slowly over the next couple of months or, die fighting, and with the only shot I might have. So again, I went and packed up my whole life in Seattle and drove myself over to Minneapolis, called my mother and said, change your flights, we're not going to Seattle, we're going to Minneapolis. And my mother flew back, and on July 23rd of 2004, I became one of the first adults in the world to have a double umbilical cord stem cell transplant. Those are actually the cells that they came from Milan that they hand carried along with a lot of other steroids and drugs and serums and things mixed in. So, but those are the cells that are living in me today. And this is probably one of the first times I stood up 3 months later, because the first 3 months after that transplant, I was barely clinging to life for most of that time. Many close calls, many visits to that tunnel of light. One of them really stands out. The situation was dire. I mean, I had fungal and bacterial infections in my blood. I had funguses growing in my lungs. My fever spiked to 107 almost, which can kill you in itself. Went deaf in my right ear permanently. Anyway, the doctors figured I probably wouldn't last the night, so they called in my family, they called in the chaplains, and started preparing for my departure. When they started packing me on ice, the experience is still very vivid in my mind today. I envisioned myself holding on to the middle of a massive cliff face, thousands of feet up, thousands of feet below, like Half Dome. And it was a severe winter storm. I mean, I was naked and freezing. My body was on fire, probably from all the ice they were packing me on. And at that point, I evaluated my situation and said, look, there's no way I'm getting out of here. This is it. This is the end. I can't climb up out of here, or I can barely hang on as it is. I don't have the strength. So I just hung on there for a little bit, and I started to think, well, wait a minute, the only thing I do have control over is actually when I let go. So the only thing I could really see in reality in the hospital room was the clock on the wall, and I could see the second hand ticking and ticking, and I focused on the second hand, and all I could see was that and the visions of my whole life passing before me. And I just decided, conscious decision to hang on for another 30 seconds and maybe hang on for another minute, and then maybe after another minute I'll let go. And I know what's going to happen when I let go, right? I fall to my death. I'm done. So anyway, I never let go of hope even then, and I never let go of that cliff. All of us, everyone in the world, will be confronted with a serious or terminal illness sometime in their lives. It's inevitable. You got to die of something, right? It's either us or our loved ones, somebody. It will be affecting us personally. And it will affect us all personally, everybody here in this room. The problem is, we as a society tend to ignore this reality. We don't like to think about it. I mean, illness is a bummer. It's depressing, it's a downer. Why would I want to think about that? But the problem is that when it does happen, and it will happen to everybody, there's no support system out there. There's no advocate system to help you evaluate the treatment landscape and make decisions that mean the difference between life and death. Not only are medical mistakes one of the top leading causes of death, but simply patients are just not, there's just no way even one doctor can know about all the treatment options that are available in the world. We need a global conversation happening. I had a vision that of a world where there would be, to create an advocacy platform, a platform where everybody would have access to a global advocate community, where doctors, researchers, patients, everybody would come together, and the most advanced treatments would be discussed by the very smartest minds in the world, and a guide for patients and doctors would be transparent and laid out. I mean, this is not rocket science. We can do this for very little cost. So this is really essentially crowdsourcing for medical outcomes or medical solutions, and I call it crowd healing. So now that I had a clear vision of crowd healing and creating a crowd healing platform, I needed a name to go with it. You always need a good name. So I started searching Together We Heal Together, and the name We Heal obviously came to mind. So things are starting, the stars are aligning. So what if we could create a place where everybody would have access to a crowd healing community and be able to crowdsource for their medical solutions? Know what all the treatments are going on around the world, have very, very smart people who have looked through all the noise and figured out what the outcome statistics are and can map the best way forward for you. Democratizing healthcare by making treatment options transparent and literally creating a demand, a market demand for only the best medicine. I hope that my story has given you the gift of hope, and I hope that no matter how dark and uncertain the future looks, there is always hope. Let's not ignore the reality of our mortality any longer. And let's not wait until it's too late when we're all in that hospital bed with no resources to help us through. Dare with me to imagine a world where nobody is left alone to fight, a world we all know in our hearts is possible. And dare to join me in creating a world where everybody has a global crowd healing community of support. Thank you.